Welcome back to Some Kind of Fun. Our guest tonight is Tigger Lunney. Tigger, you've done everything in rock?
A little bit.
A little bit of everything. So
bit.
you came here in like 91, 92 to go to
93.
93 to go to McAllister. So how did you get involved in the local rock scene?
Well, I got pulled over in Wisconsin on my way to what was probably an appallingly stupid show. Mm-hmm. And then I had $1 in my bank account because they took all my money.
Okay.
So, not being a man possessed of a lot of skills outside of talking too much and having a limited amount of experience, having thrown a few people out of the Rockledge in Lexington, Kentucky in the early 90s, I somehow walked into First Avenue during the day and the door wasn't locked. Okay. And just kind of wandered around until Jamar Arredondo was like, "What the fuck are you doing here?" I said, "Trying to get a job application." And so then he gave me a job application, and that is how I got my start. Prior to that, I'd been to First Avenue a couple times and gotten very angry that the band that got me into punk rock, the Buzzcocks, was playing a 21 Up show. So I used my brother's birth certificate to get a fake ID that had not arrived, because y'all remember back in the 90s when it took 6 months to get a new ID from the state of Minnesota.
Right.
It had not arrived in time for me to get a job there and not actually be able to use it.
All right.
So, yeah.
So you did not get into the Buzzcock show, or you did get into the Buzzcock?
I did not.
Oh, that's
I did not. I think it was November 93.
Okay.
So it was about 3 months before I started there.
And so how long were you at First Avenue, and what cool stories do you have from bouncing?
I'm sorry. First of all,
yeah.
I was not a bouncer.
Oh.
I was a customer relations specialist.
Excellent.
Sometimes I customer related people face down into the concrete. Sometimes I threw them into the street.
Right.
But it was all through the guise of customer relations.
Right.
So, bouncers are, reactive.
Right.
Customer relations specialists are proactive.
Exactly.
I worship at the altar of what would Patrick Swayze do.
Oh, excellent.
So,
So was that a title you gave yourself, or is that a title given out by First Avenue?
That is my made-up title because
Okay.
I like to overplay corporate gobbledygook speak.
Perfect, yeah.
But it was something that was like very specifically addressed when I started there, because that was the philosophy of the time, is that we were not bouncers, we were floor staff.
Okay.
And as floor staff, we had responsibilities to support the bars and pick up cups and wash them, and as part of that, wander around and keep an eye on people, mm-hmm. and then be prepared to respond to problems. Right. So it was kind of something drilled into me that it actually was. And then, as time went on, there were different philosophies, and there were people who were sort of more carved out to specifically be, security guys. But like the original idea was, you kind of started doing this thing and you were sort of fully participating in kind of the sort of warp and woof of the entire operation. And it wasn't just standing around waiting to, go find
Right.
Keely in the pit, mosh to some whale at Sunday night dance party, and make sure he didn't go flying out of there.
Right.
So, but yeah, so I worked there for almost, I guess, 5.5 years. Mm-hmm. I always kind of round up to 6. And did some other work, like fill-in stuff at like Cedar Fest, and then continued this ridiculous, spiraling, never-ending life of this kind of work by working at the Middle East in Cambridge, Massachusetts, mm-hmm. and then starting a venue, helping some folks start a venue in Boston that was short-lived called Regeneration, but handling kind of security concerns for that, and did sound at 2 bars in Pensacola, Florida in my 15-month stint there, and came back here and did stuff at Triple Rock and Grumpy's and Muddy Waters and Dark Horse, and so
when you and I first met, I was living with Elroy,
Yep.
And you were in a band, and I don't remember the name of the band, but I remember seeing you play naked at Big V's.
Okay, so we actually first met before I moved away.
Yeah.
And you were living over at that spot. We won't give out any addresses.
Right. Because
nobody should steal Pete's identity.
Right, exactly.
It won't pay off. Well. So he's a lawyer, guys. Watch out. But when I moved to Boston, I had 2 bands in Boston. My first band was actually a friend of mine from college who was originally from suburban Boston, and my best friend from high school who had gone to college in North Carolina and then moved up to Boston. And then a rotating cast of mostly talentless, unhelpful drummers. And then eventually my best friend Drew quit, but Pete, our bass player, was like, let's just rope my brother in. And his brother was great. And we played for a while and didn't come much of it. And so when that ended, I was kind of bumming out because Boston is a kind of impenetrable town in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. And if there's one place that you want to go play in a band and not be cool enough to be in a band, like, everybody's too cool. Like, if you want to play punk rock, everybody's too fucking cool. If you want to play jazz, everybody's probably too fucking cool. For God's sakes, if you want to play ska, everybody's too fucking cool. And that genre is, like, literally the dictionary definition of not fucking cool.
Right.
So, like, as far as it goes, you know, I was just kind of at a loss, and I randomly emailed these guys who I'd met in passing at a Dillinger 4 show when they played there, because those guys would always stay at my apartment with myself and my former partner. And these guys had done an interview with them, and I met them in passing, and they had this band with this terrible name. They were called the High Steppin' Nickel Kids. Okay. And I assumed that they were a ska band.
Right, because if you're High Steppin' Nickel Kids,
yeah, you know,
you
like,
got horns.
But no, they were these 3 weirdos who'd gone to Earlham in Indiana and collectively moved to Boston together, and they took me to a show under the guise of, oh, hey, we know this band that needs another guitar player, and it was like a hangout, and then they were like, well, actually, we need another guitar player. Do you want to hang out? And so that's how I became, without sanctioning the name, a highfalutin nipple shit. I mean, High Steppin' Nickel Kid. So, and we did some light East Coast touring and one extended tour out here. Mm-hmm. Almost entirely like DIY basement venues with like one god-awful show in a comic book shop in Columbus and another god-awful show in some club that did all ages shows in suburban Buffalo. And the one time that we played 2 shows was here, and because I wanted a couple days to hang out and see friends. And so we did, there used to be a basement venue right off Hennepin called the House of Knives, kind of like right under that railroad bridge. What's that cross street? You know, like, but like kind of Como southeast, like, you know, that weird fucking area that I'm sure Minneapolis have like 12 names for, but in St. Paul, I'm just like fucking trying to get to Grumpy's. Right. And so we played House of Knives, which was actually rad because that basement had the tallest ceilings of any basement I've ever set foot in my life. And they had a stage built, and the band that practiced there had a chalkboard that that like we wrote our set list on, and then I insisted before every song that people yell out the name of the next song so that like we were getting requests.
Oh, nice.
And then the next night we played V's.
Yeah.
Which was with I believe Super Hopper and the Goochers.
Yeah.
And the thing is that we had spent the entire tour being very warm. And so there had been this, what had kind of been a joke that happened a couple times at a couple shows in Boston kind of turned into this de rigueur, like, fuck it, it's so hot in here, we're sweating in a basement. Like, all clothes come off. Our drummer would actually, like, at least once per show, kind of go flying off his stool because the vinyl just, the sweat, the vinyl, the butt, things did not stick together. And that one was for you, Claire.
Thank you.
Everyone, Claire just made pukey face. But yeah, so we would, do that. And also, like being in a town that, Boston is a town where people like their tough guy music, and definitely at that time we're still holding on to a lot of entrenched homophobia. And so I remember the first time we played, there was a basement venue in Boston where, man, my Adderall is just really not working today, by the way, kids. I'm just like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
I'm just like Captain Tangent. Put a fucking cape on me.
Yeah.
But so we played this basement venue in Boston a lot that was called the House of Suffering. And it was this weird, it was like somebody had just parked a double wide in the middle of Alston and dug a basement out underneath it and then put another double wide on top. It was the strangest building I've ever been in my life. But some actual kind of like big name people from bands that I think are a little silly and might incorporate Irish music into punk rock, like might have lived there, and which was weird. And we would play their basement, and these tough guys would roll around and be like, you guys gonna friggin' play your fucking queer ass fucking pussy pop punk bullshit? And I'd be like, dude, I'm gonna fuck with you. and they're like, and I'd come out like at the end of a set, they'd be like, dude, what the fuck? Why were you fucking waving your fucking junk around, kid? Like, Jesus fucking Christ. And I'm like, come on, dude, we're all Irish here. We're growers, not showers. It's fine.
Yeah.
And they're like, but the funny thing is that like these fucking knuckleheads and scally caps, like, like a year later, were like, I'd be like hauling my guitar and they're like, dude, Tigger, are you guys going to do that fucking queer naked shit? Because that shit is so awesome. And we had like super fans. Like we had this whole thing going. Like, there was this other band, this still very good friends of mine, this band Thumbs Up. Mm-hmm. Thumbs Up decided that they wanted to be a joke positive hardcore band.
Okay.
And then that got really old after like 3 practices and 1 show, so they kept the name, but then just went to playing like shit that sounded like Negative Approach.
Okay.
And but they were still called Thumbs Up. and so it turned into this thing where we would like try to fucking one up each other. Mm-hmm. And I remember playing a show and they had this one guitar player, Rob, who was just like, this is just wrong. Like, he would just show up in like a button-up shirt and khaki shorts.
Okay.
And just stand there. And everybody else, like my buddy Dan is the Bastard was the other guitar player, also an attorney. And and like everybody be fucking naked. And this one show, Adam, their singer, like, came out on stage. I mean, we were playing a fucking basement underneath like Matt Kelly's bedroom, but like, oops.
Yeah.
But like comes out and he's got this Mexican wrestling mask on and fucking nothing else. And like, and everybody is just fucking eating this shit up. And at one point, like, and he's just like crushing some fucking John Brannon Negative Approach vocals.
Yeah.
And like, and I noticed that he's doing something with his hand, and he's wrapping the guitar, the mic cable around his fucking balls.
Oh no!
And then just like, and he's like, like it just fucking yanks and pops this fucking high note, and and I'm like, I don't know how we can fucking top that. And then like 45 minutes later, I'd like, fucking my buddy Ross, who is like 3 apples high, like on my back while like, like trying to shove a drumstick up my ass.
Oh.
So it's just like, we fucked with Boston's entrenched homophobia in a pretty big way. I mean, Big V's was probably the least warm show we played. I think we were just so fucking used to taking all of our shit off that like, that's what we did. So
you've been in a rock band. You've been a bouncer. You were also used to write for City Pages and various and sundry other places.
A few punk scenes along the way.
Yeah.
Suburban Voice.
Tell me about that.
Well, the thing is that like I was always a writer. I actually went to a residential summer art program funded by the state of Kentucky growing up for creative writing. Mm-hmm. Was always very engaged in rock and roll. Always liked the idea of writing about music, which in the early mid-90s was a very hard spot to break into, especially if you wanted to do stuff locally.
Right.
I mean, City Pages was not taking anything away from what was at the time, I think, very quality staff there.
Right.
But it was very hard to break into.
Right.
And, and as the door guy at First Avenue, mm-hmm. I'd see these guys come in on the City Pages list, mm-hmm. As like staff, like the City Pages writer would come in and they wouldn't talk to anybody and they were all, it just kind of felt like it was this world of like people being very kind of introverted and separated and that's what rock writers were.
Right.
They were kind of like this very aloof thing. And that has never been something that I have been particularly interested in, that vibe, that distance. I mean, a lot of people do it and people do it very well. And there's a lot of validity to that. But like, mm-hmm. Like I think where you find the most interesting stories about music have very little to do with having an opinion about whether or not the band's any good.
Right.
And so for me, it's like, I mean, I just made this point on the book face the other day because a guy I know who's a pretty well-known music writer said, I'm watching Decline of Western Civilization for the first time. And I was like, well, you know what? I mean, that's cool if you like watching people play shows in LA, but if you want to talk fucking punk rock, you have to watch Another State of Mind, because not only is Mike Ness the most hilarious douche on the planet in that fucking amazing documentary,
right,
but also like that's where you see the development from the lens of a band, of two bands touring and having a terrible time doing it. You mm-hmm. see the development and the building of the infrastructure and the backbone of what made punk rock fucking happen,
right,
which was the fucking networks by these bands going around and fucking touring. And as much as I love Decline, although I will say again, I have never met an Alice Bag Band super fan, but like I think like that's where you get to see the fucking story, is, you know, these connections being mapped out and these like random interviews where they go to the Haagen-Dazs where right, Ian MacKaye and you know and Henry Rollins were working and you know, and that weird shit is a lot more interesting to me than like, oh hey, this band was good. Like, well, we all know the Germs were good.
Right, yeah.
Like, so, you know, we all know that Leaving from Fear is a douchebag. But, like, you know.
You wrote I think the definitive story of Grant Hart when he passed away.
Yeah.
And it was just great. And one of the, to your point.
I'm totally going to fucking tear up right now.
Oh, I'm sorry. But to your point was those guys went and they developed notebooks that they could mm-hmm. share mm-hmm. all around the country and let people know, you go to Milwaukee, this is who you call. You go to Chicago, this is who you call.
And that was how things were passed along.
Right.
From the band standpoint and from like the consumer standpoint. You know, I mean, like, we all know this. Like, how the fuck did you learn about bands? You heard right. a band, you picked up their record, or let's be honest, their cassette tape. Don't right. be fucking posers. But like, you know, magnifying glass, you're going through the liner notes, being like, oh, they thanked this band, I'll check this band out. Right. And, you know, and that's how you did it.
Yeah.
You know, and you dug in. And that's the thing, is that, like, you know, like that kind of organic growth piece is how it happened. I mean, I wrote the definitive piece about Grant because one day in 1994 in the summer when I was subletting an apartment that didn't have a functioning shower and was working at First Avenue and had quite the reputation for the fact that I did not have a shower. Like, I was stinking up the fucking joint, leaning on the rail that everybody leans on.
Yep.
And he just walked up to me and was like, I smell boy. And I, to this day, do not know if that was a complaint or a compliment, but that's how he and I got to be friends. And that's how I ended up. People would be like, Grant needs a ride home. You live in St. Paul.
Right.
Oh, yeah, because St. Paul and South St. Paul are the same fucking thing. Like, I dare cross the dangerous river of fire. Like, eat a bag of dicks, you fucks, you know. But, like, I'd give Grant rides home, and we'd hang out, and it was fucking great. And he was, I mean, exactly who I said he was, you know, like, and a true story, I had pitched a cover piece about him a week prior. And I was at X when Lori Barbero walked up to me and was like, hey, and told me. And it was crazy. Like, and I was like, I literally just said to an editor, we need to get this cover story done.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't have long.
Yeah.
And so then they're like, well, we're locked for next week. So suddenly I'm like, what the fuck? And me being me, I never know where I'm at as far as like people's opinion of my work. And so like, I'm like, hey, like, I know I pitched this story and I just want you to know that like, this doesn't go to any fucking anybody else.
Right.
Like, but me, like, just because he died. Like, I don't get like fucking like bumped.
Right.
And Keith Harris, who is a fantastic editor, was like, absolutely not. It's yours. We're locked for next week. So it's going to be the week after. And I'm like, cool. And then so that was Thursday. Mm-hmm. And I started working on it and I was walking into, the Loring Park record store, that Terry Katzman ran.
Garage door?
I mean, was it? Yeah, Hi-Fi.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I could have come up with garage door, you friggin', go get your fucking walkers on your bikes, you fucking assholes. No, it was the Hi-Fi. It was the one next to the salon.
Yeah.
And I was literally parking in Loring Park to go do an interview because Steve McClellan was working there or helping Terry out.
Yeah.
When Keith called and was like, actually, we don't have art for next week's cover piece, so I'm going to need this shit by Sunday. And this was Friday.
Yeah.
And so I pulled out every fucking stop and I had a lot of conversations, respectful conversations with people in this town who I know loved Grant, but were just not capable of fucking talking about him because it was too soon and it was too raw, and so much respect for that. But there was also the intentionality of wanting to not have this be a local music story. And so I very specifically was reaching out to people who weren't from here and who weren't necessarily like your go-tos, and who I either knew just being around the way or like had engaged in passing in some other thing, and just like this kind of random hodgepodge of people to get kind of all of these sort of external perspectives that didn't necessarily represent like kind of the common, oh, somebody died, so now we have to talk to like these 5 people that we always talk to when somebody dies in fucking Minneapolis.
Right.
And that was a very intentional thing, but it was also a lot of extra hustle. And I had to like pull like this kid who is in this like really new band who is like way younger than anybody, and kind of get his take, and like really kind of incorporate voices that don't necessarily fall into kind of the traditional, when we talk about rock in Minneapolis or punk rock or whatever, like the kind of like go-to narrative. And I somehow pulled that off and wrote this, patting myself on the back, and wrote a 3,000 word article, and then a second article that was a summary of good stories I couldn't get in.
Right.
In 72 hours.
Right. And look,
I wasn't even on Adderall at that point, and I don't drink coffee, and
Yeah.
I don't do anything speedy, so
Yeah.
much. Anyway.
Well, thanks for coming.
Dude.
I think we're going to have to do a bonus episode. This was so great.
I feel like that was the roller coaster of Into Tigger's mind.
Yeah.
Can I talk about my 70-pound, 6-month-old Bernedoodle?
Yeah. Oh, wait a minute.
But
Wait. We
Yeah.
have one last question.
Okay.
You have an interaction between rock and roll and library studies. Tell me about that.
So, beginning of COVID, I finally, or kind of midway through COVID, through actually my friend Jennifer Caddies from the garbage pop band Trash Caddies. That's what they call themselves. Mm-hmm. Both garbage pop and Trash Caddies.
Right.
She had found this school in Detroit, Wayne Kramer State, because MC5 played on their quad.
Yeah. They got a great college debate team.
I am pretty sure that I know 5 people who care about that fact, including you. But they had switched their library science master's program, library and information science, a master's program basically entirely online, and you didn't have to pay in-state. You didn't have to pay out-of-state tuition if you were doing it online, and it was very affordable. And I've wanted to do this for years. I mean, that was kind of like I wanted that to be my grown-up job that I could never get to because things just weren't kind of economical and able to kind of accommodate that in kind of my family setup at the time. And so I went to the school, and I remember talking to some friends of mine who are librarians when I started school, and one of my friends was like, this job is just like working at First Avenue. And because, there's a lot of being like, hey, buddy, like, let's not smoke meth in the bathroom. Like, it's not, and they don't teach you that in the master's degree class. You learn about how quilts are documents too, and maximizing reference potential. And I must have written 5 papers about the impact of COVID on job stressors and staff burnout.
Right. But
I had this class that was supposed to be my cakewalk. Mm-hmm. It was oral history. It was my second to last semester. Mm-hmm. And the shift in paradigm in my relationship had taken effect at the beginning of the semester. But this was supposed to be my cake class because it's literally just interviewing people.
Okay.
And I'm like, I think I got that.
Yeah.
And my professor knew my background, and we had 3 different projects that we all got assigned to, and these projects were actual contributions to the Wayne State's library, Reuther Library, their archives of recorded oral histories. And so when we talk about oral history in the library science world, we're not talking about like what you see in rock writing, which is like, I got a lot of good quotes and then strung them together about a thing. We're literally talking about one interview with one person, working with them to try and get them like comfortable and rolling out their story. And I'm like, this is my wheelhouse. This is going to be great. And my professor's like, well, we're going to put you on the Detroit Music History Project. And I'm like, fuck yeah, this is going to be awesome. And then she tells me it's a little bit of a challenge because your interviewee is in Italy right now. And I'm like, well, I interviewed my quad in Italy. Yeah. I can handle a 6-hour time difference. And so I got assigned, and I'm not going to say this person's nom de plume, because they do not deserve any promotion whatsoever, but I got assigned an electrofuturist, primitivist DJ.
Okay.
That not even the person that I consider, at least in my network, the foremost authority on electronic music I know, because that is not a genre I'm good at,
Right.
had ever heard of.
Okay.
And I proceeded, and I'm just going to say this out loud, I proceeded to be working through the end of my 26-year marriage while also getting blown off by this person who couldn't do the interview while they were in Italy because it was a spiritual recharge retreat where they don't check emails or take phone calls, and then had a 3-day window before they went and did another one in Toronto.
Okay.
And so I was basically at what is possibly, just to be completely candid, the most miserable time of my life. Getting jerked around by this DJ who will not commit to a time. I had to take an incomplete. That jerking around, I took a little break from trying to motivate this person to work with me.
Okay.
And I certainly was not at my best as far as executive function goes because of life stress.
Right.
But that person continued to be very difficult to schedule time with. And I had April 28th was my drop dead.
Okay.
Like, I was going to fail this course. Like, I couldn't, like, extend the incomplete.
Right.
And again, this is supposed to be my cake course. This is like my snooze class. And I get an email from this DJ because we had actually set a time, and then I had realized that they had not submitted a bunch of paperwork to me that was required, and there was some other stuff. And I'm like, well, because... So I got the email that was like, I guess it's just not meant to be. And I sent my prof an email that was like, even if we could get this person to do this, I don't want to, because I will be so palpably angry with them the entire time that it won't be usable. You give me 24 hours, and I'm going to find you somebody way better and way more important to Detroit rock and roll. And she's like, okay. And I have established a mostly digital, although he and I have hung out in person a couple times over the last 30 years, but a very cordial relationship with Eric Davidson from the New Bomb Turks.
Okay. Who
guest listed me into a New Bomb Turks 9-pound hammer show in Newport, Kentucky, the 2 days after my mom died, so that I could just go to a fucking punk rock show and feel something other than sad.
Right.
And I reached out to Eric, and I was like, hey, man, I know that at this point you've probably bailed me out of more jams than some family members I know, but here's my situation. Is there any way, because it was really important to me that I interview a person of color.
Right.
Is there any way that you can put me in touch with Mick Collins from the Gories and the Dirt Bombs? Mm-hmm. And he was like, oh, shit, I had beers with Mick 2 nights ago. 16 hours later, I get a text from Mick Collins. It's like, I'm in. What do you need? And I'm like, you have to fill out all this paperwork in 3 days because we literally have 3 months of work to do in 11 days. You have to fill out all this fucking paperwork in 3 days. And we're going to talk on the phone once so I can kind of tell you what it's all about. And then we're gonna set up a Zoom and we're gonna do this shit. And that man has no fucking reason to do some knucklehead kid who knows his friend Eric in passing a fucking favor. Yeah. I was like, yeah, I'm in. And so we did this 90-minute long Zoom interview where, and yes, I talk a lot. I got in maybe 6 questions. He is an amazing storyteller. Like, he dug into stuff that, at least what he implied to me, he'd never talked about in an interview before. And all I had to do was be like, so you're from Detroit. And how did you grow up? And stories about how his dad befriended the guy who ran the biggest record distributor in Detroit in 1954 because he worked on his car, and so the guy would just give him a box of every new release every Friday.
That's crazy.
Every week.
Yeah.
For more than a decade. Mick Collins wasn't even born yet. He was born in 1965, and he came out of the womb and got to go to the basement and have every Stax, every Motown, every Chess fucking single, in the library. I mean, he had that at his fucking fingertips, and still counts Casey and the Sunshine Band as the band that got him into fucking made him want to be a musician. So, but I mean, that was just amazing. I fell back in love with school and rock and roll in that moment at one of the shittier times of my life, because honestly, as much as I love the Dirt Bombs and the Gories, the fact of the matter is, and this gets back to what I was saying about the networks and the connections and the thing.
Right.
The thing is that when people who have no reason to do shit for each other just do shit for each other, that's fucking punk rock.
Yeah.
And that's, I just think that's a fucking great story. I would hang out and interview people. I would restrain myself from jabberjawing and hang out and interview people all day if I could.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, now let's do the real wrap up. Thanks for coming on. We appreciate it. There's gonna be bonus episode because of all the great content. Thanks so much.
Awesome.
All right.
I took up hours of time. So thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you.